Tonight, we're thrilled to have Peabody Award-winning journalist Michelle Norris with us to interview Ms. Jones. For more than a decade, Michelle served as a host of NPR's All Things Considered, where she interviewed world leaders, American presidents, Nobel laureates, leading thinkers, and groundbreaking artists. She's also produced in-depth profiles, interviews, and series for NPR news programs and special reports for National Geographic, Time Magazine, ABC News, and Lifetime Television. She's the author of an extraordinary family memoir, The Grace of Silence. She's the founding director of the Race Card Project, an initiative to foster a wider conversation about race in America. In 2009, she was named Journalist of the Year by the National Association of Black Journalists. And here on this very stage, about 3 years ago, she interviewed Ta-Nehisi Coates for the opening of the Martha's Vineyard Book Festival in 2015. And best of all, she's a member of the Martha's Vineyard Book Festival Advisory Panel and a great help and support. So thank you for being here, Michelle. Our star tonight is Tayari Jones. She's back for her second appearance as part of the book festival and author series. We're lucky she came back, and I think she will tell you more about that as the evening continues. So it's a little surprise for you. She's an award-winning novelist here to discuss her acclaimed novel, An American Marriage. It's a book that has taken the country by storm. Everyone I know has read it. Every book club in America is probably reading it. Ms. Jones will open the Boston Book Festival in October, I believe. An American Marriage focuses on an African-American couple whose lives are torn up after the husband returns from a 12-year sentence for a crime that he did not commit. It's wrenching, it's heartwarming, it's an examination of how the country's criminal justice system tears apart families, African-American lives, and it's also a complicated and quite powerful love story. Ms. Jones wrote her first novel, Leaving Atlanta, while she was a graduate student at Arizona State. It won the 2003 Hurston Wright Legacy Award for debut fiction and was purchased as a film option. Her second novel, The Untelling, was awarded the Lillian Smith Book Award in 2005. She's taught creative writing both at the University of Illinois and at George Washington University. Currently, she's a member of the MFA faculty at the Newark campus of Rutgers University. And I'm thrilled that Tayari is back, especially after what I know about what happened on her last visit. She wrote her third novel, Silver Sparrow, was actually written here on Martha's Vineyard, I believe, and maybe she'll tell us more about it. So I have the great pleasure of introducing both Michelle and Tayari Jones to you.
Sue Ellen, thank you for that lovely introduction and really heartfelt, deep appreciation and gratitude for all you do to bring authors to Martha's Vineyard, to bring us just beautiful conversations that live on long after we leave this space. It's such an honor to be here with you tonight. We have a little bit of history.
It's true.
I've interviewed, when Sue Ellen listed the people that I've interviewed, presidents, astronauts, and Tayari Jones, who actually came into the studio. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but something important happened today, and I wanted to just take note of that. We lost Aretha Franklin today.
Yes.
And as I picked up the book again and I was reading it, I was thinking of the moments in Roy and Celestial's life where they may have been listening to Aretha Franklin, because she really has provided the soundtrack to our lives.
It's the Great American Songbook, really, is her body of work. And I do think it's really important the way that you know, we think of stories as being confined to books, but in many ways, every song is a story, and singers like Aretha Franklin are bringing a narrative. And music is a way that a narrative is brought to us kind of in secret or by surprise. Like, you don't think of her as a storyteller, but when you think about it, you know, Dr. Feelgood is a character.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Respect is a narrative.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite Aretha song?
You know, I don't know. There's so many from different times in my life. Like, I remember being a little kid singing Natural Woman. Like, I was like a natural...
Like you knew what a natural woman was?
I was a natural child, right? But I wanted to feel like that when I grew up. So I think I was like rehearsing my life. And I think that will always be probably my favorite. But I mean, her career, she had the career that writers dream of, a career that spans decades, that crosses generations. I mean, and then even though it is very tragic that we lost her today, you know, it is encouraging that her life was not a tragedy, and that there can be art and love and success and it not be a tragic story.
What is your favorite Aretha song? Anyone?
Oh, see?
Okay, no other artist would move us to that moment, right? My husband and I were talking about it in the car on the way here because she's on the rotation, you know, right now. And Bridge Over Troubled Water. And her version, I mean, we like the original version, you know, we like Simon and Garfunkel, but she had a way of taking music and taking stories and just injecting them and turning them into something else and turning it into a gospel song.
It's true, and that Bridge Over Troubled Water, I mean, that is one of those songs too where you can tell, you feel differently about it depending on which arrangement. Each arrangement speaks to you in a different way. I also like Say a Little Prayer.
Yeah. Her version is very felicitous.
And oh my goodness, the Christmas songs.
Oh, the Christmas album, Ave
Yes.
Maria. We could do this all night, so let's move on to your book. But I just wanted to make sure that we had a moment
For the Queen.
Aretha.
For the Queen.
For the Queen. For the Queen. Yes. So I met Tayari in 2011. I had read Leaving Atlanta. I read Silver Sparrow, and I loved it. And there was a producer I was working with, you remember Justine Kennan?
Yes.
And she loved it too, and we just kept talking, so we said, we have to bring her in. And you were kind enough to get on the train and actually come to the studio.
Time out. She says I was kind enough to come to be on All Things Considered.
Well, you know, a lot of people say, we do a lot of those interviews secretly, down the line. I mean, we're not actually face-to-face with people, but you actually came in.
I mean, it was so exciting to me, because first, I am a fan of yours, and then when you invited me to come, of course, and at this stage in my career, it was my third book. I had written 2 books. No one really noticed but my mother. And I had written my third book, and I didn't know what was going to become of it. I mean, that book, my third book, almost wasn't published. After my first 2 books, a new thing had been implemented in publishing. It's a computer program called BookScan, where they can put your name in the computer and see how profitable you are. Before BookScan, you could just kind of act profitable. And so BookScan had revealed me not to be a profitable writer, so my publisher didn't want my third book. I didn't know what I was going to do. I went to a writing conference, and I met a woman. And the woman said, I've heard that your books are out of print, but I think I can help you with the next one. And she took me by the hand, and she carried me through the crowd, and she put my hand literally in the hand of a publisher. And I was embarrassed because I thought the publisher was going to get on this BookScan thing and reject me. So I was so embarrassed. I was just trying to get away. And the publisher, before I left, said to me, but wait, before you go, she said, how do you know Judy? And I said, oh, I don't know anyone named Judy. And she says, no, Judy Bloom, who just introduced us. And it was like my nerdy childhood had come to rescue me, and I looked to tell her thank you, and she was gone.
Wow.
Like a fairy godmother. But that is how that book was published. So I felt just grateful to be back in print. And then I mean, it was my first time being on NPR, my first national media thing, and you extended your hand to me, and of course I showed up in person.
And we had a great conversation.
We did. It was really wonderful.
We hung out a little bit afterward,
We
took
did.
pictures by the NPR sign.
I was so excited.
And so I have followed your writing career, and I love the evolution. You've always been a fabulous writer, but the way that you play with form in this book, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but let's talk about the origins of the book, because you were on a fellowship at Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
You had studied race and the criminal justice system, and you were interested in writing about it, but as I understand, you weren't sure exactly what you wanted to write about, and then you heard a conversation.
Yeah, like I had done all this research about mass incarceration, right? But mass incarceration is not a story, it's not a character. I had statistics that, kept me up at night, but I'm a storyteller, and that's not a story, and I didn't know what to do. The clock is ticking, the Harvard people want me to give a presentation of my work, and all I have to show for it are a bunch of really angry index cards. And I didn't know what I was gonna do, but I went home to Atlanta to talk to my mother, and which I do when I'm upset, but also when I'm upset, I do a little shopping. And I was in the mall, and I heard a couple arguing. I heard the woman say, clear as a bell, she said, "Roy, you know you wouldn't have waited on me for 7 years." And I looked, and I thought, yeah, you're probably right,
Because you said she was really...
She looked fabulous. He looked fine, she looked fabulous. Like they were, it's like the old people say, they were unevenly yoked. Do people still say that? Yeah, and she said, you wouldn't have waited on me for 7 years. And I thought she was probably right. But then he looked taken aback, and he said, I don't know what you're talking about, because this wouldn't have happened to you in the first place. And I thought, yeah, that's also probably true. And for me, when I have two characters and they each have a legitimate point, that's when I have a novel. I know I can write that story. I can spend 5 years underground in that world if both characters are right.
So did you leave the shoes behind and run to your car and start writing, or?
No, I got done with the shopping. I mean, let's not throw the baby out with the bath. But then I knew what I wanted to write about. I knew the story. I knew I wanted to write about a young couple, torn apart by, I decided, a wrongful incarceration. Because when he said this wouldn't have happened to you, it sounded like something had happened to him, not that he had done something. And then I just started writing.
And they live in Atlanta, but you introduce, so much of your writing is based in Atlanta, but you introduce this town of Elo, Louisiana. So they go back to Elo, and that's when, am I pronouncing it right?
Yes.
Eloe. And that's when things start happening. And she has a premonition on the way there. She doesn't want to go because she senses that something...
She doesn't want to go. She has a premonition. He thinks she just doesn't like his mother. But she's having a premonition that she doesn't want... They go down to visit his family in the town where he's from. And, I was interested in these small towns because my dad is from a small town in Louisiana, and we think of the Great Migration as people migrating from the south to the north, but there was a lot of migration within the South, people moving to the urban centers of the South. So, like, my dad moved to Atlanta as the promised land, and he sent for his 3 brothers, the same way that people migrated up north, or even the way the people immigrate to other countries. One person comes and sends for the others. And Daddy has always kind of thought of us as, he always says, oh, you're my bourgeois children, like we're his children that live in another land. And so I did want to think about that idea of, even within the country, people feeling they have a foot in 2 different lives.
And this is a couple, they were on the come up.
Yes.
She's an artist, he's an executive on the come up. Can you tell us just a little bit about them and their relationship before things turned dodgy?
Yes, well, he went to Morehouse, she went to Spelman. They're kind of like, oh, who said that? Ladies, sidebar, I have not done a reading anywhere in the world and not have Spelman women show up. I mean, even when I went to Australia, I heard someone call my name, and I turned, and it was my classmate, Sabrina. I said, Sabrina, what are you doing here? She said, oh, it's not that far from Seattle. But I also was interested in writing, though, about the life I knew of people, going to Spelman and Morehouse, and just as an ordinary thing, not as an exotic experience. But he feels like he has everything he ever wanted in life. He's in love with his wife. They have kind of a fiery relationship, and he just thinks, what does he say? He says, he felt like the world before him was endless reams of blank paper. And as they say, a Morehouse man always has a pen.
Yeah.
And that's what he thinks his life is going to be. And she's an artist, and she's kind of an uncontrollable woman, and he likes that about her at first. But when they go down to visit his mother in this small town, he's arrested for a crime he does not commit in Louisiana, which is the most carceral state, in the Union. And he feels like when he went to college, his mother felt like, okay, my kid has finished high school and he's gone to college, like he has escaped prison, escaped any of the things, the statistics that she thought he could be mired in. But it felt to him almost like fate. And he's, as you can imagine, just very dejected at having had this experience.
Was that one of the points that you were trying to make, that the long arm of the law could touch you on the shoulder, could snatch you, no matter what your station was in life, that there was this threat that you could do one wrong thing and you could get caught up in the system? Because when we think of the prison pipeline, when we think of programs like My Brother's Keeper, when we think about so many statistics involving brown men, we often think of men being snatched from blighted neighborhoods, when in fact the threat is ever present.
The threat is ever present, but I also, though, I wanted it to be clear too that while the threat is ever present, it was really helpful to me to have another male voice of that same generation, Andre, in the story, because I did not want to make the case that this is inevitable. Like, that was also important to me, that there be kind of a diversity of experience within the book. But there is always that fear that despite your education, despite whatever money you have, that you're always vulnerable to the state. And so when Roy is arrested, it's like everybody's nightmare has come true.
And Andre, we should say, was the best man in their wedding.
Andre, I feel like I have to defend Andre. Andre is the best man in their wedding, but he is her best friend, more so than his best friend. In light of events that happen later in the book, I just feel that should be clear.
Right, and then becomes a really good friend.
Really good friend. It's a love triangle. I don't think that's a spoiler, right?
Friend with benefits? That's a spoiler. One of the interesting things about the book is, in the structure of the book, is that you're reading a novel, and then it moves into this epistolary structure where you're reading a series of letters. And when Roy is incarcerated, they're no longer together, and the letters are what tethers them. And so you learn about their relationship through a series of letters. And I think one of your reviewers said it so beautifully: reading someone else's private letters feels almost as intrusive as spying on them through their living room window. The personalized salutation, the handwriting quirks, the inside jokes sprinkled throughout offer a glimpse at an interior world that is only meant for the recipient to see. There's no performance, no act to put on for third-party observers, and while pursuing just one letter between two people provides a hint into their relationship, digging into a whole trove of letters sent over the course of several years can reveal intricacies that face-to-face interaction with the authors never would. So we get to know them through their letters. How and why did you decide upon this structure? And did you actually, in the course of your scholarship, study prison correspondence to understand what it looked like and what it felt like?
I decided to go with letters because prison is brutality. And when you read a novel, you are experiencing vicariously what the characters experience. Same for when you write a novel. I did not want, as a writer, to vicariously experience brutality, and I didn't want you to, as a reader, either. I mean, reading a novel, it can be emotional, it can be bittersweet, somewhat painful, but you shouldn't feel brutality. And so it occurred to me that if I tell the story through their letters, then what we will read of his prison experience is what he would share with his wife. And he would not share some of the more gruesome details with her, but he would share enough that we could get the feeling of it without having to have the blow-by-blow of it. And that was really, because I kept trying to figure out, how am I going to handle prison? You know, like how? I mean, I know that, like, you ever watch MSNBC after it goes off?
Oh, all those prison
All
stories?
those prison shows, this idea of like prison is entertainment. And I also didn't want to do that. So, and I'm a letter writer in real life. I write lots of letters. I've written you a letter.
You have.
And I know the form, and prison is the only place where people are still writing letters. And I receive letters from prisoners. I've always received them. Once you have your picture in Essence, you will receive letters.
It's true.
Yeah, you will receive
It's
letters
true.
from prisoners.
And,
Like
and they have lots of numbers on the outside and a very
Yes.
special kind of time stamp on them, and you...
The first time I got a letter from prison, I was like, I don't know. And I was speaking to the poet, Nikki Giovanni, and I said, I got a letter from a prisoner. She said, did you write him back? And I said, no, I didn't write him back. I don't know who this person is. And she says, whenever you receive a letter from a prisoner, you must write him back, because you do not know what he had to go through to get the stamp, the envelope, the letter, the paper. And I realized that when someone writes you a letter from prison, it really is a message in a bottle. And so I kept that in mind too when I was writing the correspondence between Celestial and Roy. Write letters to each other. He writes to her dad. He writes to his lawyer. So there are a lot of letters throughout.
Was that a way also to keep you from having to go to prison and write about the prison experience? I mean, we hear about sort of a rabbi, as it were, that he has, but you don't spend a lot of time talking about the prison experience. Was that in part because you also didn't want to have to immerse yourself in that life?
I didn't want to have to immerse myself in that life, and also I wanted to keep our eyes on the characters. One of my big fears in writing about this, like sometimes people say, oh, you've written a novel about mass incarceration, and I get really sleepy just even hearing it described that way, like a novel about mass incarceration. It sounds like something you read because you have to, because you should, because it's important, but not because you want to keep turning pages. And I really wanted this to be a novel about a young couple facing an incredible challenge. And the letters also helped me keep it on them. It helped me keep my eye on story rather than situation.
Would you mind sharing a couple of letters from the beginning of their separation as Roy and Celestial are trying to figure out how to remain tethered to each other after this tragedy where he's
Yes.
he's sentenced to 12 years
He's sentenced to 12 years.
for
Okay.
sexual assault.
This is, I had this page. Hold on one second. Give me okay. This is her first letter to him, and then I'll read his reply. Dear Roy, I'm writing this letter sitting at the kitchen table. I'm alone in a way that's more than the fact that I'm the only living person within these walls. Up until now, I thought I knew what was and wasn't possible. Maybe that's what innocence is, having no way to predict the pain of the future. When something happens that eclipses the imaginable, it changes a person. It's like the difference between a raw egg and a scrambled egg. It's the same thing, but not the same at all. That's the best way that I can put it. I look in the mirror and I know it's me, but I can't quite recognize myself. Sometimes it's exhausting for me simply to walk into the house. I try and be calm, remembering that I've lived alone before. Sleeping by myself didn't kill me then, and it will not kill me now. But this is what loss has taught me of love. Love makes a place in your life. It makes a place for itself in your bed. Invisibly, it makes a place in your body, rerouting all your blood vessels, throbbing right alongside your heart. When it's gone, nothing is whole again. Before I met you, I was not lonely, but now I'm so lonely that I talk to the walls. They say you can't receive mail for at least a month. Still, I'll write to you every night. Yours, Celestial. Then he writes back. Dear Celestial, I don't think I've written a letter to anyone since I was in high school and assigned a French pen pal, and that whole thing lasted about 10 minutes. I know for sure that this is the first time I ever wrote a love letter, and that's what this is going to be. Celestial, I love you, I miss you, I want to come home to you. Look at me telling you the things you already know. I'm trying to write something on this paper that'll make you remember me, the real me, not the man you saw standing in the broke-down country courtroom, broke down myself. I was too ashamed to turn toward you, but now I wish I had, because now I'll do anything for one more look. This love letter thing is uphill for me. I've never even seen one unless you count the 3rd grade. Do you like me? Check yes, no. A love letter is supposed to be like music or like Shakespeare, but I don't know anything about Shakespeare. But for real, I want to tell you what you mean to me, but it's like trying to count the seconds of the day on your fingers and toes. Why didn't I write you love letters all the while so I could be in practice? Then I would know what to do. That's how I feel every day in here, like I don't know what to do or how to do it. But I always let you know how much I care, right? You never had to wonder. I'm not a man for words. My daddy showed me that you do for a woman. The first thing I did as your husband was to sit you down, like the old folks say. You were wasting your time and your talents doing temp work. You wanted to sew, so I made it happen. No strings. That was my love letter to say, I got this. Make your art. But now all I have is this paper and this raggedy ink pen. It's a ballpoint, but they take away the casing, so you just have the nib and this plastic tube of ink. I'm looking at it thinking, this is all I have to be a husband with? But here I am trying. Love always, Roy.
There is an intimacy in reading someone else's letters, especially love letters, and there's all kinds. His next letter is to his mom, and he says, hello from Mars, and he's not kidding because all the cells, the blocks are named for planets.
That's a true,
Yeah,
that's a true
and that's
thing.
true?
Yes, that's a true thing.
Do you hope that when people read this, that they might be moved to write letters? I love letters also. My parents were postal workers. My mother demands letters from the children. Thank you letters. I like stamps. But most of us don't send letters anymore. We communicate, even the most important correspondence is through email or increasingly text. Are you hoping that people will think about letters and expressing themselves?
Well, I will tell you, I am single-handedly trying to bring the letter back. But let me tell you, when you write letters these days, anybody here write letters? People do not write you back, do they?
Yeah.
They don't. They just take it as an artifact. Like the other person doesn't understand it as a back and forth. They think it is a gift. And I write my mother a letter every Sunday morning. I write my mother a letter.
Wow.
And she texts me back. She is almost 80 years old. Like she is from the letter writing era. And she texts me, got your letter. But I do hope, I would love to bring people writing letters to each other back, but if there's one thing I really would like people to write letters to people in prison. I recently wrote a piece for the Times about the prison letters of Nelson Mandela. Mm-hmm. And it was so clear in reading those how the letters, and he was only given a very small ration of letters he could send, and you can see he writes all the way to the edge, like no part of the page is wasted, and that was his only lifeline. And there's so many people, because prison, I say this all the time, all prison represents family separation. Every person in prison represents a family that has been separated, and letters are the thing that keep people attached to the lives that they've known. And they can keep the letter. With the email, you can't keep it. The letter, you can hold it, you can revisit it. It's important.
How many remember having a shoebox full of letters under the bed or someplace? Well, what's going to happen? Are you going to have a shoebox full of old cell phones?
It's true. It's true.
I hope you remember the passwords.
Everybody, try to write one letter this week.
That's a nice assignment.
Yeah, you can do it.
Okay. Assignment accepted.
Okay. You can write me back.
You know what? I brought your letter with me.
Oh.
When I packed to come up, I brought it with me.
Oh.
Yeah, because I did treat it like an artifact, and I have to cop to this. I didn't write her back. I DM'd her on Twitter, which is even worse. Thank you for the letter. You were influenced by the Odyssey.
Yes. Yes, I loved the Odyssey when I was in high school.
Oh,
And
who are you? You
lot of
loved the
people-
Odyssey?
a lot of people do.
Wow.
Yes, thank you. It's a great story. The Odyssey is a great story. But when I was writing this, I was thinking of Roy. You know, he's in prison. He gets out of prison. He wants to come home. He wants to come home from prison and find a faithful wife and a clean house.
So, but she's not like Penelope,
Well,
weaving and
'cause-
unweaving that funeral
Well, yeah,
shroud.
because the Odyssey was written in 60 BC. He wants the same thing now as Odysseus wanted in 60 BC. And she's an artist, and her life has gone forward. And so really this is, in many ways, this novel is about the disappointment of realizing that life, in fact, goes on, right? I mean, he wants her to not go forward with his life, almost like as a her life as a gesture to him, like as a gift. But she has only one life. And she realizes that she has only one life. And that's really what I look at this as, almost like a modern day revision of the Odyssey.
And in modern times, you bring in characters and you bring in storylines and you bring in sort of social structures that it seems like you want us to marinate on a little bit. So he comes from a family that doesn't have a lot of money, but is wealthy in other ways. They're
Yes.
strong family structure. She comes from a family that has considerable amount of money.
Yes, her dad is an inventor. Her dad is like a mad scientist. And he has a small patent. Do you all know that there are people out there who have small patents that make them millions of dollars? Like her father has a patent on a chemical that keeps orange juice from separating so fast once you shake it. Like something like that can make you a multimillionaire.
So I was going to, you've jumped ahead, but I was going to ask you, how did you think about this? Were you reading the small print on the back of your
No, I
orange
wish
juice
orange
container?
juice wouldn't separate so quickly. It is so annoying. I can't stand that. And I was like, I wish somebody could fix this. I would pay them $1 million. And so, so she has but you know, she says, he always says, well, your father is a millionaire. And she says, he wasn't a millionaire when I was growing up. And for him, that difference is immaterial. So like, I was interested in the way class affects.
Yes.
Like he feels, I was really trying not to say like, his family is poor, but they're solid. Her family is not poor and they're not solid. I think both their families are solid in different ways. And both the parents, what they want is their child to be happy. His mother wants, of course, his wife to, you know, wait for him while he's in prison because that's her child. Her child needs that support. But her family is like, our child deserves her own life. So, I mean, that is really the conflict. I feel like the conflict that they have in their relationship is the same conflict we all have in our relationships. The question is, how much of your life do you hold back for yourself, and how much do you give to your relationship? That's the question they have, but the fact of his wrongful incarceration turns everything up to 80. You know how sometimes, like when you're growing up and you're black, they say you have to be twice as good. You have to work twice as hard. I feel that's true even in their relationship. The question they face in their relationship, they should not have to face it. And then for her to be a good wife, she has to be 10 times the wife as a regular wife. But she's treated as though she's not doing the minimum when she's being asked to do this emotional climbing of Mount Everest. Because in the face of wrongful incarceration, in the face of institutional racism, even in your marriage, you have to be twice as good.
And there are expectations of her,
Yes.
that she will carry a torch.
Right, all of this, but she shouldn't be in that situation in the first place because book clubs have come to blows. Did you read this in your book club? Did anybody come to blows? Did it get close? This book club in LA, like they came to blows over this.
So what, there's Team Celestial and Team Roy?
They were like Team Roy, they're all kinds of teams, but it was all based on how much should she do, how much should he do, and it kind of frustrated me because to me the question is that they shouldn't have had to be in this situation in the first place. So then all the burden of his happiness falls on her when the source of his unhappiness is the state. It's not her. Like she has, an individual woman is supposed to pick up the slack for the state.
Is this where the epistolary structure helped also to prevent readers from rushing to judgment of the characters, because you find yourself sometimes questioning her choices, sometimes questioning his umbrage. Is it, is it deserved? Is he going too far? Questioning Andre's motives, questioning the parents' meddling, or whether they're, standing up. And if you're reading it in a letter, it's different than actually watching their actions or reading about their actions.
Well, I felt like the letters, too, helped us get through it fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's out of prison on page, early, like, all the way up here. Like, this is early. Because I was really interested more in the way the dynamic played out. And the letters helped me get through it quickly. But I do think the letters, it also allowed them to be a little more playful. I don't know, I just liked it. I just dug it.
And you see things evolve. So at one point, Roy writes a letter and signs, "Your husband, I think."
I know, right? I mean, the fun thing about writing this was how much, even though he's in prison, their relationship is just like everyone else's relationship. Like, she's an artist, and, he feels a little resentful of her success. And I can testify that one does not have to be in prison for this to be a dynamic in your life, right? And she has to figure out how to make him feel included. The same things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of fun writing this book. Even though the subject matter is difficult, I enjoyed these people and their conflicts. But I did have to make decisions, like, she finds a new love. I think that's all the way up here. And I had to okay, what could be a new love for her that a reader would accept, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so I felt like, okay, if she falls in love with the boy next door, that is an accepted romantic trope, right? You get to fall in love with the boy next. That's written in the book somewhere. Mm-hmm. Everyone is entitled to the boy next door. So maybe they would accept that. But then some people say, well, he's been next door all this time. Why didn't she do this earlier? But then I thought, okay, if I have her fall in love with a completely new guy, people would say, he just walked up in there and they're supposed to be in love. And then I realized that there was just very little space for her to have love, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there was no Goldilocks straight up the middle, not too hot, not too cold, that just writing the idea of her finding love required me to kind of upset expectations from the reader.
And finding love while her man is in prison.
While he is in prison for something he did not do. And that was the other thing. I was like, okay, because people are like, why don't you just make him guilty so then you don't have to worry about her being allowed to find love. Like, if he's guilty, but I was like, is she only allowed to have a life if he's guilty? Like, is she entitled to her life just because it's hers? Or, it's not like through chastity she can get him out of prison, right? That's not how that works.
I'm listening to you having the conversations with yourself as you're writing this. Should I do this? Should I do that? It
was really hard because when I would tell people, oh, I'm writing this book, it's about this man who's wrongfully incarcerated and his wife, they're like, it's about her brave fight to free her man? Like it's like Aaron Brockovich, but black? And I was like, well, no, it's about a lot of things. I was at a cocktail party and I told this guy, well, she doesn't really wait because he took his drink and walked away from me. He just walked away. I thought he was maybe going to get me another drink. No.
So do women and men react to the book and the characters and the decisions they make differently?
Everyone gets mad at someone, but people get mad at different things. Like, I went to this dude book club, and...
You say a dude book club?
Dude book club. It was like a dude book club. It was called,
Bro Club.
It was called Dudes in Book. It had some really, or Beards in Book. Something it was like dudes reading books together in a group. And eating chicken wings. And they were all so mad at Andre.
Wow.
They were so mad at Andre.
Because he broke the bro code.
And then some women, not women tend to have more nuanced read of this book, but some women were mad at her because they felt like, oh, she should wait on him. But I came to think, though, that everyone seems to think of her as something you can hand back, like, oh, man, you're out of prison? Oh, I'm sorry, here you go.
Okay, just like you get that brown paper bag when you leave.
Her affection is irrelevant to everyone. It's almost like, here you go, but you can't pass off another person to another person. Even if you beat the man up, you cannot as Andre's daddy tells you, he says, you're going to have to take that butt whooping. You're going to have to take it. But the good news is, it doesn't matter who wins the fight. It doesn't determine who she will love. Like, you can't, it's not like you can have a fight and then, like, she's given over like a trophy, like, well, congratulations, you have beaten your rival.
Right.
Would you like some love? Like, that's not how it works. And that was really important to me, not to think, I mean, the heart is a mysterious thing. And having the right to your own heart is part of owning your own humanity, I think.
So when you're in the thick of it and you're writing the story, do you truly have control, or at some point do the characters have control over you? Is a story like a river? Does it go where it needs to go when you create these very strong-willed characters?
We negotiate. Like, I mean, I am the one writing the book. I like to say, like, I'm driving the car, but the characters are unruly passengers. Because sometimes they'll get some idea, and I'll write it down. I'm like, no, that's not going to work. We can't do that. And I'll just, do it over. But writing a novel is a strange balance about control, right? Like, on the one hand, you have to shape it and have your ideas and control it, but you have to also be open to plot twists you hadn't planned on, which is why you can't write a novel writing to a question you already know the answer to, because it's just like in real life. You can't go into a relationship thinking you know how it's going to be. You can go into a relationship knowing what you want, and you can try to guide it, but things can happen, and you have to be open to that, because I feel like as a writer, if I know what's going to happen before it happens, you can feel me aiming for it. But if I don't know, I will be surprised when I write it, and you will be surprised when you read it. Like that massive revelation he has in prison, I was shocked. I was stunned. I was as stunned as he was. I was like,
So how did it come to you?
I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
How did it come to you? How did that come to you?
I don't know. I was just writing it, and he was just like, I can't say it, but he was like,
So we're not going
Yeah.
to say what it is because
that is the one spoiler I never talk about, because it was so startling. I don't want to deprive you of that moment. But I was as shocked. And then I thought, I guess that makes sense. That would explain a lot. So then I think that maybe I was giving myself hints throughout, and I didn't realize it.
we talked about how the relationship changes.
Oh, it's about to get hot in here.
You read there's a bus outside, so I think they're waiting for it to move. But you read one of the early letters. Would you mind reading one of the letters later in their relationship? Again, another exchange that shows how you use the letters to convey the subtleties, and in some cases the sledgehammers that show just how much the relationship has shifted.
Celestial makes dolls, and she's done really well with her dolls. She's won a contest at the Portrait Museum, and she makes a lot of dolls that look like him. And he used to think that was cute when they first got together. He saw every doll she made as like a tribute to him. But now that he's in prison and she's getting well known for these dolls that look like him, he feels like, you're getting famous off of me, you see? And this is a letter he writes after he finds out that she's won a big contest. Dear Georgia, a few months ago, you said you were dream adjacent, but now it looks like you've been living your real dream behind my back. The shop, that was my idea, but your fantasy involved galleries, museums, white glove installations. Don't treat me like someone who doesn't know you. I understand what you're saying, and I understand what you're not saying. Are you ashamed of me? You are, aren't you? You can't go to the National Portrait Museum and tell them that your husband is in prison. You could, actually, but you won't. I empathize. It's a lot to get used to. Before, we were living that Huxtable life, but now where are we? I mean, I know where you are, and I know where I am, but where are we? Send me a picture of the doll. Maybe I'll like it better when I can actually see what it looks like. But I must tell you, I don't care much for the concept. And even if what you said in the article is true about how you want to raise consciousness about mass incarceration, let's say this wasn't bullshit. Please explain to me what a baby doll is going to do to help anybody in here. Yesterday, a dude died because no one would give him his insulin. I hate to break it to you, but no amount of art is going to bring him back. Look, you know I've always supported you. Nobody believes in you more than me, but don't you think you crossed the line here and not even tell me about it or mention me? I hope that prize from the National Portrait Gallery means a lot to you. That's all I'll say. You know, if you're not comfortable telling people that your husband, an innocent man, is incarcerated, instead you can tell them what I do for a living. I've been given a promotion. I push a trash can around picking up trash with giant tongs. It's a sweet gig because this is an agribusiness site, so before I was picking soybeans. Now I work inside, and although I'm not wearing a white shirt and tie, I do have a white jumpsuit. Everything is relative, Celestial. You still have your upwardly mobile husband. In here, I'm white collar. No need to be ashamed. Your husband, I think, Roy. Yeah, he's angry, right?
And can I just say, whenever someone says, that's all I'll say about that, it's never all they're going to say about that.
You know what? Instead of reading her letter back, I'm going to write the letter when he comes to his senses. His cellmate is named Walter and is wise in many ways. So he writes her back. Dear Celestial, according to Walter, I am being a jackass for not looking at things from your side of the bed. He says it's unreasonable for me to expect that you would constantly reiterate that your husband is incarcerated. He said, quote, this ain't The Fugitive. You want her to go running after a one-legged man? You see why we call him the ghetto Yoda? He says that your potential for advancement in your profession will be greatly diminished by having your brand associated with incarceration, which evokes troubling stereotypes of African American life. Except he said it like this. She is a black woman, and everybody already thinks she's got 5011 babies with 5011 daddies, and that she's got welfare checks coming in 5011 people's names. She already got that to deal with, but she got the white folks to believe she's some kind of Houdini doll maker, and she even got them thinking that this is an actual job. She is working her hustle. You think she's supposed to get up there telling everybody that her man is in the Hooskow? Soon as she say that, everybody will start looking at her and thinking about the 5011 everythings, and she might as well go on back home and work for the phone company. Again, these are his exact words. My exact words should be, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to guilt trip you, but it's heavy. You don't know what it's like in here, and trust me, you don't want to know. I went back to the library and pulled up the article and the photos one more time. You wore a smile on your face and my ring on your finger. I don't know how I didn't see it before. Love, Roy. See?
I loved reading the letters.
She tried. You know, she tried. They were only married 18 months. As she says, my daddy was still paying for the wedding. It's a lot.
One of the things that I really found intriguing in the book, of many things, was Roy's reentry and tiptoeing toward love again. And you write about something that, and again, I'm sorry if it is a bit of a spoiler, but you write about something that we don't hear about very often, is when someone has been in prison and they first find themselves in the arms of a woman again.
Yes. I mean, when he is released, you know, that it is kind of expected thing that they say when men get out of prison, the first thing they want to do is, you know, is find a woman. And everyone makes it seem like it's just a matter of sexual deprivation. But it is that intimacy that he craves. And in this story, though, it's so much, and this is something that I think isn't really talked about. Like, he gets out of prison and, you know, he wants to be intimate, he wants to be sexual. And the question is, you know, whether or not to use a condom, right? If he's with his wife and there is a condom, it feels like she's not his wife. And he's like, is it because I was in prison? And how does she answer that? What does it mean? What is the negotiation there? You know, in the studies that people have done about actually HIV in the African American community, you know, it factors in, it dovetails with mass incarceration. But this man is so lonely, so broken, and he says, I want to be with someone, he says, I want to be with someone skin to skin. This is like what he feels he needs to heal himself. How far should a woman be willing to go? To what level of exposure will she take on in order to heal him? You know, that's the question. How much sacrifice is too much?
Did you take your editor or maybe even your publisher out of their comfort zone in writing about some of this?
You know, I had my first editor left the company, so the book was orphaned, and I got to start anew with the editor who had never seen the book. My new editor is a man, and we didn't talk about anything in there. I think he just, you know, it's awkward, and we didn't talk about it. But I was really actually most kind of weird about in this book, thinking when I was writing it that my parents were going to read it. You know, even though I'm a fully adult person of 47 years of age, the idea of, I mean, there are, I think, 3 sex scenes in this book, and I did kind of feel like I had to kind of push back against my own understanding of respectability to write this book. And it was a hard, you know, I've been a good girl, you know, like I was, you know, nice girl, and my other books had younger characters, and in this one I had to really kind of make myself vulnerable with the characters as I was taking them through this journey. I think that's what took me 6 years to write. I couldn't figure out how to get them out of this situation.
Where do you write?
Like physically?
Like, what is your
Well,
your-
if the writing is going well, I feel like writing is like being in love, right? If you're in love, anything can be anything can be a date when you're actually in love. You're like, oh yeah, we can go to McDonald's. You know, we can drink the shake with 2 straws like Lady and the Tramp. Like you can do anything when you're in love. But when you're not in love, that date needs to be right? So when I'm not in love, when the writing is not going well, I need a clean room, I need to face north, I need green tea, I need all these things. But when it's going well, I can write on my arm, you know. So when I need help, I do like to be in a clean, quiet room. I like to write early in the morning. I set the room up before I go to bed because I feel like it's just like when you go to the gym. If you lay the gym clothes out, you're like about 40% more likely to actually go to the gym. So if the room is set out before bed, I can just wake up and do that 2 or 3 hours in the morning. I use manual typewriters.
You still are writing on a typewriter?
I have a whole bunch of them. I love them. And I like making all that noise. I feel like I'm getting something done.
There's something and when you hit that,
yes,
when it flies
and you get that
across,
little ding. It's such a nice little positive reinforcement. You've written another line. So yeah, that's what I do.
How do you transfer them? I mean, I know there's you can scan things, you can do things now.
No,
Is
I
that
key
easier?
it back into the computer. On the days when I can't get anything done, I don't have any new ideas, then I'll key in what I've already written. And also sometimes that jump starts my mind.
The title of the book, An American Marriage.
Yeah, you know, I'm not great with titles. All my titles have been given to me by someone else. And
You didn't choose this one.
well, it was like this. They said, okay, we need to come up with a title. We need to brainstorm. Brainstorming, no judgment, just say anything you think of. And I said, my editor's name is Chuck. I said, Chuck, we should call it An American Marriage. I said, that sounds important. Whenever you say something is American, it sounds important. And I said, my cat, her name is Canella. I said, Canella is writing a memoir. It's called An American Feline, you know, and it's a definitive book on what it is to be a cat in Brooklyn. And my editor was like, I kind of like it. And I was like, American Feline? He said, no. He's like, I like An American Marriage. And I was like, no, I was just playing. I don't. And I just kept pushing back and coming up with all these other titles. And he finally said, why don't you want it? And I said, to me, An American Marriage sounds like a novel about some white people in Connecticut getting a divorce. And he said, well, Connecticut is a very small state, so why is it that you think something that happens in a tiny state like Connecticut is more definitively American than what has happened to your characters? And I couldn't really answer him, but I called my mentor, who's a playwright in Atlanta, Pearl Clegg, and she's been my mentor since I was 16. She took me up under that wing, and I told her, and she said, I get how you feel. And I said, and if they call it An American Marriage, are they trying to hide the fact that, you know, the characters are black? Like, I didn't know what was going on. And she said, look, if you don't like the title, if you don't think it represents the book, you don't have to take this title, but don't think you don't have a right to it. That so many people sacrifice so much that you can say, you are an American citizen. What happens to you is American. You have a right to that. And so I thought about it, and I said, well, I'll think about it. Maybe I'll take it. I called the editor back, and I told him I was coming closer. And then he said, are you afraid of this title because you're afraid to claim a big idea? Are you afraid to say, I am thinking about American topics, major topics? He says, I want to tell you this. He said, as a man, I think that is a gendered thing. This fear of saying, no, I'm entering the conversation. And so I thought about it, and I thought they were both right. And I finally said, okay, I'll take the title. And he said, oh, thank God, because we already made the cover.
Now, speaking of the cover, when you get the book now, they made space for this wonderful little O on the title, because this was a Oprah Book Club selection. What does that mean when you're an author, when you get that call? And not just that they have to go and print 100,000 more copies immediately, because her book, her imprimatur moves books, but as a writer, what does that mean? How does that impact the journey that you've been on as a writer?
Well, she called me 5 months before the book came out. I was just minding my own business. I was driving the car in Las Vegas, and a call came in and said, block call. Mm-hmm. I answer block calls because I'm nosy. I feel like somebody blocked the call for a reason. What is it? So I said, hello? And the voice on the other end said, hi, this is Oprah. Just like that. And it was her. She has a really distinct voice. And I'm a Southerner. She's a Southerner. So I said, ma'am. And she said, I'd like to use your book for my book club. What do you think? I said, yes, ma'am. That would be nice. Thank you. And I had to keep it secret for 5 months. I couldn't tell anyone. It was really, that part was isolating because I felt like I had this big secret and I couldn't tell anyone.
Not even your mama?
Oh, no, that's the last person. Everybody at Cascade United Methodist Church would be aware. So, but what it meant for me as a writer, or I'm going to say what it meant to me as a person, it made me realize that Oprah Winfrey was lending her good name to my work. And I was aware of it because her name is big. And so you think about it, but then it occurred to me how many other people in my life have lent me their good name. From even even when you get ready to go to college, your high school counselor has to lend her good name to your project. Someone, even when you vouch for me to come on All Things Considered, you lent your name to this. And that all of us all the time are exchanging the gift of our good names. It just made me feel very grateful, not just to Oprah Winfrey, but it made me look back and with gratitude at my entire life.
Will this become a film?
Well, I think it's going to become a film. Oprah is producing it. It's really exciting. They haven't cast it or anything, but it's an exciting thing, but you also have to let go. Like, that's someone else's, it's a different project. I went to LA and I met the filmmaker and everything, but I was so nervous I couldn't eat. I had to come back home and eat. We had a lunch thing and I just sat there looking at my food, and then I went home and ordered room service from the hotel. I was starving. But it's exciting, the idea of reaching more readers, through this different form. And I'm just curious. But I don't know, who do you think should be in it?
I've been casting it with my friends.
Okay, who do you think?
Well, I think Sterling K. Brown.
Who would he be?
Pardon?
Who would he be?
I could see him as Roy.
You know how old that man is?
Pardon?
Don't you think he's a little long in the tooth?
Oh!
For this role, Roy and them are 34?
Well,
no, but it's older than him. It's younger than him. The hard thing I had with casting it in my mind, I kept casting people, because Roy and Celestial are born the year that I'm born, so they're my age, but you see, but they're not the right age now. You see?
Well, okay, another member of the Sister Circle thinks Donald Glover.
Oh, who would he
play
be?
Roy.
That's Roy? Okay.
Oh, this is to be continued in the lobby, obviously. Sensed your suggestion.
But that was such a tricky thing, though, to think of actors and think of what age they would need to be. But okay, this is the only one I think this is adorable. Tell me if you think this is adorable. For Celestial's parents, you ready? Angela Bassett and her real life husband, Courtney Vance. See, that's cute, right? I think that's adorable. That's my favorite idea.
So, and I was thinking that Joe, when Andre's dad read him, I was having a Papa Pope moment, a Joe Morton kind of moment.
What about Eddie Murphy as the ghetto Yoda?
Oh, that would be, as Walter?
Yeah.
As Walter,
yeah.
that would be fabulous.
Yeah. But that is all the dreaming I allow myself to do. I feel like every time I get caught up in that kind of stuff, I get further away from my next project. But I do sometimes think about it just a little bit.
Can you talk about your next project?
I'm trying to write, I will tell you the thing that sparked my next project, 2 experiences I had. When I was a little girl, I had a cousin who planned her wedding. We were about 11 or 12, and she planned her entire wedding. She even had Not Born Yet for the flower girl because, you know, she needed someone who was going to be 3 in approximately 11 years. And she got married on the day she said she was going to get married. Wow. And people did get born to be those flower girls, and I was the maid of honor, just like she promised me when we were little. But I thought a lot about this idea of marriage and this idea, like a little girl aspiring to marriage. So I was thinking a lot about that, and like what would happen if the day you set for yourself, came and there was not a person, what would you do? So that was part 1. Part 2, also when I was a little girl, about 11 or 12, I went to a wedding, and we were all seated, like everyone's seated here, and we were seated for an hour and a half, and the wedding didn't start. My mama took me, in the back of the church because she knew the mother of the bride, and we went back there, and there was the bride. She was beautifully dressed. She looked great. She was weeping. She did not want to marry him. She was just crying, and finally her mother came up with a compromise. She said, "What if you walk down the aisle, just don't file the papers? That way, no one is embarrassed, but you also don't have to be married." And so when you write something based on something that really happened, you write to the question. And my question is, why didn't she want to get married? And at what point did this man find out he wasn't actually married? Can you imagine you say, "I do," you eat the cake, you do all of this, you literally jump the broom, you do all your rituals.
Oh, so she would actually move and live with him, but just it wouldn't.
I don't know what happened. Do you tell him that night? Do you say, "Oh, by the way," like at what point do you? Yeah, but I mean, if someone married you, you got married. How many people here are married? I'm not married. On your wedding day, weren't you under the impression that you were married? Yeah, like you're under the impression that you're married.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm curious
intrigued.
about that.
I'm very intrigued.
I'm working on that. Yeah.
So it's going to be one or the other, or they'll both be characters?
I think they're both. I think that the woman who is sobbing on her wedding day because she doesn't want to do it is because it's something that she thought of. It's a dream she had as a kid. And I'm thinking she should be 40-ish. So she needs to feel like she's 20 years past that deadline she has set for herself. And also, I think bridesmaids who are going on 50, it's a different vibe, right? I was recently a bridesmaid. It's a really different thing.
So we're going to bring the audience into this
Okay.
and let them ask a couple of questions. I have 2 more questions of you. What is your superpower? I've been asking women this question repeatedly for something I'm working on right now.
I think my superpower is that I am able to let things go. That's my I can
That
let
is a
things go.
superpower.
Yeah, like when I wrote a novel in my 20s, I sent it out to a couple of publishers. They weren't interested in it. I realized it wasn't a really good book, and I just wrote another one. I let it go. But I think, though, that as everyone, your superpower is also your kryptonite, because I do wonder if there are things in my life that I've let go that I probably shouldn't have. So it goes both ways.
We're going to take some questions from the audience. A hand went up right away, right in the back.
Yeah, but she has the microphone right there.
Can you raise your hand again?
Oh, she's carrying the microphone.
Hi, thank you very much. I read your book. I thought it was terrific. But I'm wondering, I'm a Roy fan, and that's because he actually met a woman who was very good to him, and he was very honest with her about that he was married.
Was he now?
Yeah.
You
He told her
think?
he was married.
I thought he said I'm kind of married.
Well, because he wasn't sure of his wife, not because of himself. She was not really honest. And that's why I wonder if you gave him that woman because you knew people might not like Celestial as much, unless he had an alternative that was a good woman as well.
No, I mean, I don't think, I mean, I think that the challenge with Roy and Celestial, they're in such different, it's a whole lot easier to be faithful if you're the one in prison. It's a whole lot easier to be honest if you're the one in prison. Like, it's not equal. This challenge is not equal. So I wasn't really, I do think there's a lot of pressure on women writers, just like on women people, this whole if people like you, right? Like the question of if people like you is such a burden on women and women characters. So I wasn't trying to mitigate that. And I really tried hard in the writing not to say, oh, I want them, just like in real life, I try not to work hard at worrying if they like me. I had to just try to tell a truth as the way that I understood the truth, just in the way that you have to walk in your own truth in life and not worry about an invisible audience judging you.
So they might not like, it was okay if they didn't like Celestial. So right back there, pink shirt on. You just turned around. Can you stand up? We'll get a microphone to you.
Oh, it's hot. This is really. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Excuse me. I have a two-part question.
Okay.
Right. My first question is if you could speak a little bit on your process for writing the male narrative experience, right? And what you would say to critics who would say perhaps that there's potentially some othering that can also happen, you know, given your own, you know, lived experience, your embodiment of the multiplicities of identities that you have, writing a male experience, right, his voice. And then the second question was around whether you see this book as a form of social activism.
Okay.
Thank you. The thing about writing the male voices, I don't know if othering works is a two-way street, right? Like usually othering happens when a person writes about someone with less power than they have. I think that as a woman writing a man's voice, I realized like how many books by men I've read in my life. Like, so even though I went to Spelman College where I did like a lot of study in Black women's writing, all my life I've read so many books in men's voices. So I feel like as a woman I have a lot more education in that than probably vice versa. So I didn't feel worried that I was out of my depth in writing male voices. And I haven't really encountered criticism about it, but if I did, I guess I would ask them about what women writers do they read? Because women are so underread.
And is this a book of act of social activism?
I think every story is a work of social activism, actually. Just by choosing what you're writing you're making your statement about what stories you think are important. And so I think in writing about them that it is, but I feel like hopefully writing is like, kind of like almost like sleeper social activism. Like you want your reader to be so caught up in what they've read that they don't realize that they're getting kind of activisted at, if you can imagine such a creature. I think that's the key. Like, I want someone to read it because they want to turn the next page. Because I feel like so often, I'm about to, real brief, I feel like so often, particularly with writers of color, there's this sense that your novel is like medicine for the American soul. Like, take your medicine, come over here and read this and learn something, and as opposed to something you want to do when you're on vacation, when you're on the beach. So, and I think that deprives us of our humanity when our art is seen as purely instructional. So I think that it is social activism to the point that all work is social activism, but I also hope it'll be a pleasure.
A good beach read. The sister who sang to us earlier.
Hi, this is a small question. In the parlance of modern movie making,
Yeah.
was Elo an Easter egg? Do you know where Elo shows up in other literature?
As in Toni Morrison,
Yes.
Tar Baby?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
I am a professor of English, yes. I love Toni Morrison so much that I'm constantly writing little love letters to her because I hope one day, yes, that's my hope. I think she is like the greatest, she's the greatest American writer. And
She is.
and I just like to shout her out all the time.
And you do that in almost every novel, don't you?
I do. I'm serious. I even have on my desk a little jar of dirt from the lawn of the place where Toni Morrison grew up. Just a little bit.
In Ohio?
In Lorain, Ohio, yes. It's a little jar. Don't tell her. I don't want her to be afraid.
Right here.
I very much enjoyed your book, so thank you. But I'm curious, you mentioned that when your characters speak to you, sometimes you listen, sometimes you don't, sometimes they influence the direction that you take. So I'm curious with this book, did you begin knowing how the book would conclude? Or as you worked through Celestial, Roy, and Andre's relationships, did that help instruct you? I mean, or did that guide you to the end?
I didn't know. I wasn't sure how it would end because I think I was spending a lot of time thinking of how it should end as opposed to how it would end. But I realized, I was stranded about 50 pages from the end for a year. But I realized it was because I was letting Roy's understanding of the world shape the book because he's the main character. And Roy thinks that the question of his life is how can he be given back all that he has lost? He has lost his job. He has lost his house. He feels like he is losing his woman. He's lost these things, and he wants these things back. And he thinks the moral litmus test of everyone is to what extent have they assisted him, right, in his struggles. And so I was letting him kind of drag me through because he thinks that if he can be given back what he's lost, he can move forward. But I realized that he didn't realize what he had lost. And that's how I figured out what was going to happen at the end. What he has lost is his citizenship. And by that I mean the way you're a citizen of the world is by what you contribute to the world, what you can do for others. He forgot. He had lost the understanding of himself as a person who can contribute to someone else's happiness, to someone else's life. So once he realized that, then he could become the hero of his own story and move forward. But he and I both had to realize that that's what he needed to move forward, to be given back his agency.
So it took you a year to sort of figure that.
I couldn't, so I was having them do this, having them work out this way. Maybe he could be with him, maybe he could be with her, maybe this. And it just never felt satisfying to me because I think Roy didn't realize that he needed to learn anything. He felt that he had suffered so much. I think he felt like the way you would feel like, I've been through so much, why do I have to learn something? You know how you feel that way sometimes? Like, let somebody else learn something. Why do I have to learn something too? But once he did, he could move forward. I could finish the book. This book was 4 years overdue. You know, I was saving my money to repay the publisher. No more brunch. No more Ubers.
No more shoe therapy.
No more shoes, no more dresses, because I thought I couldn't finish it.
Yeah. We're so glad you did. You wanted to ask a question right back here.
Hi, I had this question when I read the book a few months ago, and you sort of touched upon it when you read one of Roy's letters to Celestial that comes towards the end of a sentence. But why don't you think Celestial has the responsibility to share what happened to her husband. Because, like, as you said, as an author, the book is activism, and Celestial has this growing fan base, but she doesn't take that opportunity to share her story.
You know, I feel like I get it. Like, I can see why he would want her to, but I can also see how, like, it would become what everyone knows her by. It would become defining of who she is. It would become her narrative. And I think she just wanted to be an artist and not be the bearer of a certain kind of struggle narrative. So she talked about incarceration. She just didn't personalize it in that way. I just think our expectation of women is just that that's what she would do. So it feels so jarring because it's so against our expectation. But she did not do anything to hurt him, right? She still is paying for his bills. Her uncle is still his lawyer. She keeps his commissary up to date. But it's like she didn't do everything. She did some things, but not everything. And it seems like anything short of everything makes it seem like she did nothing at all.
It's complicated. We're so glad you came back, especially after
Oh, y'all want to hear this story?
what happened. I recommended you when you wrote Silver Sparrow. You
Yes,
came, you
yes.
had a great time.
Yes.
And you met interesting people.
I'm so scared to tell this story. What if the person is here? That's a possibility.
Okay.
You gonna take care of me?
I'm going to take care of you.
I'm like scanning the audience. I can't. I am too scared. I'll tell you in the signing line. I am too scared to reveal this.
Okay.
Suddenly, when I was thinking about it, I felt my heartbeat going up. But I huh? Yeah, I let things go. I had almost actually forgotten this experience until I got here, and the guy was at the airport with my name to pick me up, and I was like, you know, one time I was in Martha's Vineyard, and someone had, would pick me up, and they weren't the person they said they were.
And took you on a wonderful adventure.
Yeah, I'm fine. But you know how people always say, like, what's the wildest thing that happened to you on tour? But I had forgotten about that experience, but I am delighted to be here. I'm happy to be back. Thank you for having
And
me.
we hope you come back when you write your next book about marriage. Tayari Jones, it's been such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I wish I could remember what she looked like.